guys, I'm Kesha. Welcome to the channel, to my wonderland. It is coffee time, and today I bring you my January wrap-up.
It's coffee time!
So January was actually a very good month because I ended up reading 13 books, which is a lot for me, and that is because one of the weeks I joined the Buzzword Readathon and I managed to read a couple of books in a week. I think I read 3 books in a week, which is a lot for me. I normally go from 1 to 2 books per week depending on how busy I am. So 13 books in the month of January is actually a really good start for 2019. So we're going to be checking out the books that I read, and I'm going to be rating them as always with coffee mugs, which are the equivalent of the stars that you give them in Goodreads, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to be also starting from the lowest rating to my highest so that we end up in a positive note. Now, the worst book that I read in 2000 in January, that position goes to a book I did not expect it was going to be in the bottom of this list, but here it is, and that is Slenderman by Anonymous. Now, I picked up this book. It was kind of like a cover buy, let's be honest, and because I've always loved the myth of the Slenderman and the video game, and I've always been interested in it, and also because I have not watched the movie that came out, I believe, last year of Slenderman, so I thought, you know, it would be the perfect combination: read the book, watch the movie. And another selling point from this book was that it is a media kind of book. It's a compilation of letters, diary entries, phone logs, and things like that, you know, pieces of newspaper articles and things like that. And I thought, hold on, a horror book about the Slender Man and kind of like with the media inside? Count me down for it. Oh boy, was I wrong. Very wrong. I think I might have been very hyped for the book and my expectations might have been really high, but this book ended up being boring, dragging. The characters were truly bland. There was nothing special about the characters. I did not care at all about the characters. There were no real personalities. Everything was just so slow. It was not scary at all. There was no tension, no real mystery. And where's the point of a horror book where, you know, there's no tension, mystery, there's nothing, you know, thrilling about it? Man, I mean, I just finished it because it's easy to read since it's written, you know, it's a compilation of letters and things like that. So it's kind of like easier to read, but it was very basic, very bland, and I was very disappointed. So this book only got 2 coffee mugs for me. I was debating between 2 and 3, but I had to stay true to myself and give it a 2 because I did not really enjoy this. Next we have with 2.5 coffee mugs, 3 Truths and a Lie by Brent Hartinger. And my issue with this book was that it is supposed to be a YA mystery thriller in which 4 friends go to this kind of cabin in the woods that belongs to the father of one of them, and they play this game, 3 Truths and a Lie, and then things start to get weird and they think there are people watching them, and they start to think that they're being, you know, watched and followed, and they get scared. So, you know, it's something that I should be interested in, you know. Young people go to a cabin in the woods and shit starts to go down. Should be something down my alley. But I didn't enjoy this. There was something about the writing that I didn't like. It was kind of simplistic. And what I didn't like is that you were fed the information with a spoon. Like, there was no room for imagination, for coming to your own conclusions. Like, they were basically telling you who to be suspicious about, what to be suspicious about, and that kind of kills the sole purpose of a mystery thriller. Like, you're supposed to think, see things, and come to your own conclusions and decide who do you think did this or what do you think is going on, and not that the author himself is basically telling you how things are going. And I don't know, I think that's what really put me off. It kind of picked up a little bit in the end, like the last 60 pages maybe I loved or I liked more than the rest, let's put it that way. But still, it didn't make the cut of 3 stars. 3 star is like good basic for me. So this one was a bit below that. I appreciated the story and stuff, but there was something about the writing that I just couldn't connect to. The other one that got 2.5 coffee max is a graphic novel, and that is Lost at Sea by Brian Lee O'Malley. And I picked this one up because I got it secondhand, and I thought it's a standalone graphic novel, and one of my goals was to read more graphic novels this year. So let's kickstart January by reading one of them. I did enjoy the art a lot, but I did not really enjoy the content. Like, the story just felt like it was going nowhere. I felt like it was a recollection of thoughts that were not properly planned, and it kind of disappointed me a little bit. Like, I could relate to some of the feelings the main character was having, but it was just, like I said, kind of like a bunch of feelings and thoughts just tossed together without any sort of structure, and it just felt, you know, not enough. Then I listened to the audiobook of The List by Siobhan Vivian, and I listened to this audiobook while, you know, I was walking or like doing some sport at the gym. And I liked the idea of the book, but I thought it felt a little bit basic, so I ended up giving it just 3 coffee mugs, which is good. You know, it's standard, okay, normal, okay read, but not something that I would particularly reread. So The List is based on a high school where every year a list is being released of the ugliest and the prettiest girls in every class. So this is one of the things I didn't like, that the list was only based on females, you know, the ugliest and the prettiest, but only females. Like males, nobody cares. So there is a bunch of female characters. I think there's, I believe, a total of 6 girls, and they every chapter is about one of them, so it just jumps back and forth between characters, which at the beginning in an audiobook was a little bit complicated to follow everybody's stories, because at the beginning there is like one chapter for each girl, and then they start to intertwine, and in the end all the stories are kind of getting combined into one. So it was a little bit messy at the beginning on the audiobook. I don't know if it was the same thing on the physical book. And I mean, there was a part where they're touching, disclaimer alert, eating disorder topic, and I'm not 100% happy how the topic of the eating disorder was handled throughout the whole book. There were some things that I liked and others I didn't like that much, so it ended up being a mix of things I didn't like and things that I liked, so I ended up giving it 3 coffee mugs. Then I have 2 books that I rated 3.5 coffee mugs, and the first one is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, and this is a retelling on The Little Mermaid. And even though I really loved it, don't get me wrong, I decided to give it only 3.5 because this is a debut novel, and I feel like there is still so much potential from this author that needs to shine, and I'm really excited to see what she writes next, and it's definitely an author that I'm going to be following. I love that our main characters, Eliane and Lyra, were so sassy, and they were sassing each other all the time. So basically we have a really nice retelling in which she also goes a little bit deeper into a darker part of, you know, the mermaids and the sirens, which are different creatures, and we get a darker retelling of The Little Mermaid, but we still have our prince and our mermaid, and the story is so much adventure packed and so interesting, and there is some twists and turns that you don't really expect, and I thought it was wonderfully written and done. So, you know, I was so close to give it 4 stars or 4.5, but I decided to keep it at 3.5 because I felt like there was still so much potential and so much more could have been done with the story. The other one that I gave 3.5 coffee mugs is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, and I read this one for the Buzzword Readathon, and I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. It is basically a YA mystery thriller in which 5 students go into detention, but only 4 of them making out of life. So who killed this person that died in detention, and what are the events that made this murder happen? How did it happen? One of the things that I love the most about this book is that we're following 4 totally different characters, and in each chapter you see things from the perspective of each one of them, so it also jumps between characters in the chapters, and I love that, and I love to be able to follow the aftermath of that detention day and that murder, and how each of them is coping with what happened in their own way and how much they grow. So I love to see all of that character development in the book. So I call the end in the middle of this book. I wasn't 100% sure, but you know, I noted a question with a question mark, and it turned out to be the end, and I realized that towards the middle of this book, so it's funny. But even though I did expect that, I still was invested in the story, in the characters, in the mystery, and I was still interested in reading more. Then I have a book that I rated 3.75 coffee mugs, and that is Trial by Fire by Josephine Angelini, and this is the first book in a trilogy, and I really loved it. We're following the story of a girl that basically, she's called Lily, and she has this big allergy problem, and she goes to a regular high school, and she's in love with her best friend. So we're just following like a very basic contemporary, but then one day Lily starts hearing voices that are calling her, and one day she gives in to that voice and she finds herself in a totally different world. She's in a parallel universe, and this goes from contemporary to fantasy, and it is a wonderful ride. I love the magic system in this book. I loved everything that was described about the magic and the creatures, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna be following up with the trilogy, but I ended up giving it only 3.75 because I felt like you know, it was a good start for the trilogy, but it was not there to get 4 or 5 stars. And the remaining 6 books are all 4 stars books, so it was actually not such a bad reading month. And let's start with The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, because I've been meaning to read this book since last year, and I've had a copy since last year, but I never read it. So by January I was like, this year it's happening, girl. So I picked it up and I absolutely extremely loved it. The writing is just fantastic. You are living with the characters, you're feeling what they're feeling, you're so connected with the story. It's as if you would be there living in this town with them, and it is because of the wonderful writing. And even though I should not be able to relate because it's nothing that I had to personally experience myself, I was living it with them. It was as if it was happening to me. And we're following the story of Star, and she lives in a very poor black neighborhood, and one day she's hanging out with her friend, and they're in the car, and the police stops them, and then suddenly the policeman shoots her friend dead without any explanation. So it is about, you know, police violence against people of color and all of this, and it was so interesting and so rich. And the new book from Angie Thomas on the come up just came out in January, and I am so down for it. Then we have The Last Time I Lied by Rayleigh Sager, and I read this one also for the Buzzword Readathon, and I loved it more than I expected to love it. This is an adult mystery thriller, and we're following the story of a girl that was sent into a rich girl's kind of summer camp, and while she was there, she was sharing a cabin with 3 other older girls, and one night those 3 older girls went out and never came back. They basically disappeared. So we are now fast forward 15 years after these events, and our main character, she's still having, you know, these dreams and these thoughts about those 3 girls that disappeared, and she gets the opportunity to go back to that camp where it happened. So we are getting the story from her past and from her present self, and it is so interesting, and it's so well done how they are starting to reveal all the mysteries and all the story between, you know, the past and the present. And even though some of the turns you expected, the end was like, my body was not ready for it. And I was so intrigued and so excited and so thrilled, and that is what a good mystery thriller is supposed to do. So that's why I decided to give it 4 stars. I did a good job in January picking up books that I had liked, and that is The Gentleman Guides to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. And this was actually one of the ones that surprised me because I had seen it everywhere and people were praising it last year, and I thought it was gonna be like a standard 3 coffee mug rating, but it ended up surprising me because the characters were so well fleshed, and I was so invested in the story, and it just such a huge adventure. It turned up being something like I was not expecting at all, and the humor was on point. It's basically a story of three young people: Monty, his sister, and his friend who's he's secretly in love with, and everybody knows this. And they start a last trip before starting you know, the real life in college and being an adult, and things turn out to the worst, and they end up in an adventure all over the world, and it's just fantastic. This book is just epic, and I can't wait to read the second book, even though it's not a real sequel, but it is following Monty's sister Felicity. Another one that got 4 stars is Berserker by Amy Laybourne, and I had been putting off this book, and I'm so mad at myself that I didn't read this sooner. But the convenient part is that this January the sequel was released, so now I can jump to that one as well. We're following the story of a Norwegian family, and they all have different powers that come from the Viking gods. And Hanne has the special power of being a berserker, and she thinks this is a curse, even though other people think that it is actually a gift, a blessing. And one day they are about to be discovered, and they have to run away and leave everything behind. And it is so different from other books that are about kids with superpowers, and it was so good. And disclaimer alert, there is some damage done to animals in this book, and that was the hardest part for me to read. I just cannot read things that have to deal with animals being hurt. But this was so original and so different. It was so good. I should have given it 5 stars. Like, seriously, this book is amazing. If you love books about children with powers and you're looking for something different, you know, despite the regular fantasy stories, this one is definitely for you. This is fantastic. Then I also read an ebook, and that is In the Tall Grass by Stephen King and Joe Hill, and this I believe is only available on ebook, and it is a short novella around 60 pages or so. And I decided to pick this one up because the movie hopefully is coming out this year, and I had not read it yet, and also I wanted to see how it was, you know, the co-writing experience with Stephen King and Joe Hill. And because I heard somebody saying this was very morbid and disgusting, and I was like, hi, I'm here to pick that up. And I have to admit it was, but I loved every minute of it. So basically we follow the story of a brother and a sister, and they are driving in their car, and they are on the road, and they hear somebody screaming for help, and the screams seem to come from a green field of grass, and the grass is very high up. And they decide to stop and investigate because they're hearing this voice of this little child asking for help, and they go into the tall grass. And once they go in there, they realize there is no way out. Disclaimer alert for a lot of things. So you really need to be into horror and disturbing stuff in order to read this novella. If not, I would keep myself away from it. And the last book I want to mention is actually the first book that I read this year, and it was The Chalkman by C.J. Tudor, and this is a debut novel, and I was super interested by the premise of the book, plus it was blurred by Stephen King, and I totally loved it. And I'm excited to see her second novel, which also came out, I believe, in February this year. So basically we're following the story of a couple of kids, and we follow 2 different timelines. We follow the kids when they're 12, and we follow the kids 30 years later. Does this give you some It vibes? I think so. And basically we follow their lives and the events that happened and how that changed their lives forever. And then on the other side, there is the character of the Chalkman, who is this mysterious character that leaves them messages with chalk drawings. And I thought that was very interesting. It was kind of, it gave you Stephen King vibes, but it had also a couple of things that were original. My issue was that towards the end, where all the mysteries and everything was going to be revealed, I was not surprised or shocked, and it kind of disappointed me a little bit. It felt like, everything had been building up to something great, and then it just fell flat. However, like I said, this is her debut novel, and I thought it was really interesting. I really liked the writing, so I'm going to give the second novel that she has put out this year a try. So these are the 13 books that I managed to read in the month of January, which is really good for me. I really hope that you enjoyed this wrap-up. Let me know down below what you thought about the books that I have read, and which are the best books you read in January 2019. Give the video a thumbs up for support, subscribe to the channel. All my other social media is listed down below for you guys, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!